Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive into the OEIS. For those of you just joining us, we take one of these fascinating sequences from the OEIS and we kind of, dive deep into it. So today we're tackling A000167, and on the surface it looks unassuming, just a list of whole numbers. But trust me, there's a lot more going on. In fact, this sequence connects us to the world of something called a modified Bessel function. So the formal definition from the OEIS says A000167 gives the nearest integer to the modified Bessel function kn2. Okay, I know modified Bessel function might sound a little intimidating, but I promise it's not as scary as it seems. Can you help us break this down a little bit? What exactly are these functions and why are they hanging out with our integers?
Yeah, you're right. The name can be a bit of a mouthful, but you can think of modified Bessel functions as mathematical tools that help us describe certain types of change or patterns. They pop up a lot in physics, actually. So imagine a drumhead vibrating. The way the waves move across its surface can be modeled using these functions. Or think about heat flowing through a metal rod. Bessel functions can help us predict how the temperature changes over time.
So these functions are describing real-world stuff. That's pretty cool. But I'm still trying to picture how this connects to our sequence of whole numbers. We've got A000167, which is just integers. And then we've got these functions describing waves and heat. How do they meet?
Yeah, that's where the kn2 part comes in. The k tells us we're dealing with a specific type of Bessel function. It's the modified Bessel function of the second kind. And the n is like our variable. It can be any whole number. And that's the reason limit to a sound. Means we're focusing on what happens when we plug the number 2 into this function. So for each whole number we plug in for n, the function spits out a number. We take that number, round it to the nearest integer, and boom, that becomes the next term in our sequence.
Okay, so it's like we're taking snapshots of this Bessel function's behavior at a specific point. And those snapshots create our sequence. I have to admit, it feels a bit like we're playing a rounding game, but with serious math involved. But what I don't get is why this is so special. What makes this particular sequence, derived from this specific function at the point 2, worthy of attention?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's why mathematicians get so excited about the OEIS. What's fascinating here is that we're connecting two seemingly different worlds. The continuous world of functions, where things flow smoothly, and the discrete world of integers, where we jump from one whole number to the next. By rounding those function outputs, we're creating a bridge between these two realms.
So it's like we're taking this smooth flowing function and using it to build a staircase of integers.
Exactly. And the fact that this specific staircase, built from the modified Bessel function at 2, shows up in mathematical literature, tells us these integers and the patterns they contain aren't just random. They probably hold deeper significance, connections to other areas of math we might not even suspect yet.
Now, that's what I call intriguing. We've got integers linked to a function that describes real-world stuff. What kind of information is this sequence encoding? What can we learn by studying its ups and downs, the way the numbers change as we go further along?
Well, remember those real-world examples we talked about, like the vibrating drumhead? One key thing about Bessel functions is that they have points where their output is 0. These are called zeros. And they're not just random. They follow specific patterns.
I'm starting to see where this is going. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Could there be a link between those zeros and the way our A000167 sequence behaves? Maybe how often certain integers pop up?
Now you're really getting into the heart of it.
Yeah.
And that's a question we'll definitely explore as we dig deeper into this sequence. So, ready to continue our exploration of A000167?
Absolutely. Last time we were starting to connect the dots between those zeros. You mentioned the points where the Bessel function output is 0 and the patterns we see in our integer sequence. Did you have some time to think about that connection?
I did, and it's a tricky one. It's not that the zeros directly dictate which specific integers show up in A000167. It's more about how the overall shape and behavior of the Bessel function influence the kinds of numbers we get when we do that rounding step.
Okay, walk me through that. I'm all about visualizing these things. How does the shape of the Bessel function affect our sequence?
Well, the modified Bessel function of the second kind, the one we're dealing with, has this interesting property. As you plug in bigger and bigger values for this, the output of the function gets smaller and smaller. It's like a hill that gradually slopes down and flattens out.
So visually, we're picturing a descending curve I'm following so far.
Exactly. Now remember, for our sequence, we're always plugging in 2 for the other part of the function. So as n increases, the output at 2 gets closer and closer to 0. And when we round those tiny numbers to the nearest integer, we're more and more likely to end up with either 0 or 1.
Uh-huh, that makes sense. That's why we see so many zeros and ones in the later parts of the sequence. It's like the Bessel function is whispering to us, hey, things are getting really small over here.
I love that image. It really highlights how the function's behavior is reflected in the sequence. But there's another piece to this puzzle that's worth considering. Remember how we're always using 2 as the input for our Bessel function. That choice isn't random either.
Wait, so there's something special about the number 2 in this context. I thought it was just an arbitrary point we picked to sample the function.
It turns out that Bessel functions have certain sweet spots values where they exhibit unique characteristics or where interesting things happen. And for this particular type of Bessel function, the number 2 happens to be one of those sweet spots.
So it's like we're not just looking at any old point on this curve. We're focusing on a point that already has some significance within the world of Bessel functions.
Precisely. If we were to choose a different input value, say 1 or 3, we get a completely different sequence. The patterns, the frequency of certain numbers, all of that would change. So the choice of 2 is key to shaping the unique personality of A000167.
That's fascinating. It really highlights how interconnected all these concepts are. We start with this seemingly simple sequence of integers, and it leads us to this whole world of functions, special values, and hidden relationships.
And we're just scratching the surface. Remember, this is just one sequence out of hundreds of thousands in the OEIS. Each one has its own story to tell its own connections to explore.
It's mind-boggling, really. We've talked about how this sequence connects to real-world phenomena through Bessel functions, and how the choice of 2 adds another layer of meaning. But I'm curious, are there any other properties of this sequence itself that stand out to you? Anything within the numbers themselves that makes you go, that's interesting?
That's a great question, and it brings us back to the heart of number theory. While the connection to the Bessel function is fascinating, there's also a lot we can learn by simply looking at the sequence itself, analyzing the patterns and relationships within those integers.
So for the next part of our deep dive, we're going full number theory mode. Let's see what secrets this sequence holds. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into A000167. We've gone from integers to Bessel functions, explored real-world connections, and even found a sweet spot in the number 2. Now it's time to put on our pure number theory hats and see what else this sequence has to offer.
I love this part. It's like we're detectives searching for clues, hidden within the numbers themselves.
Exactly. So where do we even start? When you look at the sequence, what kinds of patterns or properties jump out at you?
Well, one thing that's always interesting to look at is the rate of growth. How quickly do the numbers in the sequence increase as we go further along?
Okay, let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 7, 11, 28. It definitely seems to be getting bigger, but not in a simple, predictable way, like a straight line.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
And it hints at something deeper going on. Remember how we talked about the Bessel function gradually decaying as it increases? Well, that decay isn't perfectly smooth. It has its own subtle ups and downs.
So those tiny fluctuations in the Bessel function are causing these seemingly irregular jumps in our sequence.
Exactly. It's a beautiful example of how even small changes in one realm can have significant effects in another. But there's more. Let's think about those zeros we discussed earlier, the places where the Bessel function output is 0.
Right, those sweet spots you mentioned. But how do those zeros relate to the patterns within the sequence itself? I'm not seeing the connection yet.
It's subtle, but it's there. Remember, we're rounding the Bessel function outputs to get our integers. So if the function happens to be very close to 0, for a particular value of n, the corresponding term in our sequence will be either 0 or 1, depending on which side a 0 falls on.
So those zeros act like magnets, pulling the sequence towards either 0 or 1 at certain points.
That's a fantastic way to put it. And if we were to map out the location of those zeros and compare it to the pattern of zeros and ones in our sequence, we might start to see some interesting correlations.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. We've got this interplay between the continuous wavy world of the Bessel function and the discrete jumpy world of our integer sequence. And the zeros of the function are influencing the distribution of numbers in the sequence.
And we haven't even talked about other potential patterns, repeating motifs, relationships between adjacent terms, maybe even some fractal-like behavior, lurking beneath the surface. There's a whole universe of possibilities waiting to be explored within this single sequence.
It makes you realize that these sequences in the OEIS aren't just abstract curiosities, they're like portals to deeper mathematical truths, connections that we might never have stumbled upon otherwise.
That's precisely what makes number theory so captivating. It's a constant dance between patterns and surprises, And each new discovery opens up a whole new set of questions to explore.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've only just scratched the surface of A000167. But even in this brief exploration, we've uncovered some pretty amazing connections.
And that's the beauty of it. There's always more to discover, more to learn. I encourage everyone listening to dive into the OEIS themselves and see what mathematical treasures they can find. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the one to uncover the next groundbreaking connection or hidden pattern.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for guiding us through this fascinating deep dive into the world of A000167. I think I can speak for all our listeners when I say we've gained a newfound appreciation for the hidden depths of this seemingly simple sequence.
The pleasure was all mine. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that mathematical curiosity alive.
And with that, we wrap up another fascinating deep dive. We'll be back soon with more mathematical mysteries, so make sure to join us for the next adventure. Until then, happy exploring.